Welcome to the Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast. I'm Tim Conrad, President of Butterfly Effect Communications. Our team of information officers will take you through our experiences navigating the ugly 2023 British Columbia wildfire season, along with lessons from past emergencies during this podcast. I'm happy to welcome guest host Jan Enns of Jan Enns Communications, as I am the guest on this episode. I was a public information officer in 3 emergency operations centers, the Caribou, Squamish-Lillooet, and Columbia-Shuswap regional districts. And I led the Caribou's Pathways to Preparedness project. Jan has experienced being evacuated many times and unfortunately lost her home to the McDougall Creek wildfire outside of Kelowna last summer. She's known as a huge supporter of many working in public relations. Immediately after being evacuated, she took time to help others, check in on those she knew were part of the response, including me. Let's learn more about Jan.
Jan Enns is highly regarded for her engaging delivery and practical tips. Jan brings 3 decades of experience, insight, and enthusiasm to her sessions. She's best known for helping local government professionals implement programs that not everyone in a community may want or want to pay for, ranging from mandatory recycling to privatizing seniors' care. Jan thrives on empowering local government professionals and elected leaders to become calm, confident, and compelling communicators. Whether in person or online, Jan provides custom media messaging and social media training and coaching to help her local government clients achieve their corporate goals, avoid or minimize issues, reduce the need for damage control, and even sleep better at night. In addition to her hands-on experience working for the Regional District of Central Okanagan, Interior Health, and the Insurance Corporation of BC, Jan is a sought-after conference and workshop presenter. She's a regular presenter at BC's Local Government Management Association events, a faculty member for BC's Municipal Administrative Training Institute and Local Government Leadership Academy, and has taught citizen engagement for the University of Alberta. Her recognition also includes LGMA's Distinguished Partner Award. Jan holds a master's degree in communications, a certificate in local government administration, and IAP2 certificates in public participation. She leads the Okanagan Communicators Network, co-administers the BC Local Gov Communicators Facebook group, and is an active member of the Canadian Public Relations Society. Outside of helping local Gov pros, you can find her loving life in Kelowna, British Columbia. Tim Conrad is a seasoned public relations professional who excels in difficult and high-pressure work. Tim has worked in a variety of industries including natural resources, municipal utilities, dental services, construction, pet services, finance, and events. He has held leadership roles in emergency management, communications, and post-disaster engagements in some of Canada's largest emergencies. These include record-setting 2023 wildfires in BC's Caribou, Squamish-Lillooet, and Columbia-Shuswap regions, 3 record-setting British Columbia wildfire seasons from 2017 to 2021, healthcare and post-secondary education during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the 2013 Southern Alberta floods. His work in emergencies has been studied by academics worldwide and adopted in California, New Zealand, and Australia. Tim received the reputable Shield of Public Service Award from the Canadian Public Relations Society for his exceptional efforts during and after the 2017 wildfires, and the Lamp of Service Award in 2022 for distinguished and dedicated volunteer service, leading CPRS professional development nationally for nearly a decade. He is a former structural firefighter who responded to over 1,000 calls over a dozen years.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you, Tim, for allowing me to do this. I mean, what an honor for me to get to interview you on your podcast. So thanks for doing that. But let's get started with our first question, shall we? And that is actually something that I've been quite curious about for most of the time that I've known you. And that is, how'd you come up with your company name, Butterfly Effect Communications? And what does that mean to you? How'd you come up with it?
Yeah. So this is my second company in the time that I've been in public relations. I had one when I was younger, when I first started out, and it was called Ripple Connection Promotions. And I did a lot of like event websites and stuff like that. I was kind of a little bit more marketing focused. And so I couldn't use that one again. I had to have something new. But I just want to tell a little story about that one. It was Ripple Connection came from sitting next to a pond and just throwing little pebbles out. into the water, and it
Right.
was perfectly calm, and watching the ripples come to the edge and realizing that this one little pebble made this big impact, right? And so when I started to think about this company and what I want to do, one thing I've always had in my head is that I've always kind of operated that it's like, kind of public relations is a lot, the way I operate anyways, a lot of little small changes to get big results. And so that's where the butterfly effect comes from. I can't take credit for the name though. This was a conversation, this over a couple weeks, and my wife came up with the name. So credit to Ardella. She came up with this name one evening when we were sitting and chatting about it. So and that's where it comes from. I would love to have butterflyeffect.com, but thanks to the movies that have been made on this topic, not possible. Very, very expensive to buy that domain name. So,
Right. What is it? Butterfly effect?
Yeah, so it's butterflyeffectcommunications.ca. Hopefully I come in and check it out. I'm going to continue to add resources there for people. Of course, the podcast is there, but I have a big bank of resources. And as I discover things, I try to put this big bank of resources up there that people can refer to if they need to. So
that's great. Well, I'm sure that we all appreciate your resources, especially this podcast series. So let's get on with this one. But I actually have one more question about you, Tim, just diving a bit deeper. Public relations and communications has many facets, and crisis comms is clearly your specialty, without a doubt there. I know from my own experience in the EOC and watching my colleagues' experiences in the EOC, it takes up a tremendous amount of professional and personal time and energy. When that call comes, you basically give up your normal life. So my question to you is really, this summer, this coming season, where the rest of us are looking at going like picnicking or paddling, you're going to dive back into disaster. And I'm just curious about what drives you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I really do enjoy the work, and it kind of grew as a kid. I grew up around firefighters, surrounded by them. So on my street, there was loads of them. The chief lived next door, and he's the reason why I have these helmets behind me, because he used to have that on his wall, and so I wanted my own helmet someday, and so it just became like doing, providing community service was kind of how I grew up, and through helping neighbors out, I was involved with scouts and things, and then kind of got, when I went to college, my professor, Trudy Richards, was very influential, and kind of showing me this path. And we did this mock exercise at a naval base in Halifax, actually, that they gave us a really neat experience. And then I was locked from that. And so I like, when I jump into these things, I know that I can help people, and I know that I can bridge some of the gaps that are there in disasters naturally. And because of the background I've had through firefighting and through doing the different emergencies I've done, I have developed a good understandings of how things work. And so I like to be able to help people out. And ultimately, that's where I go, because that it just feels amazing to help people, and in particular when they're at their worst moments, which we often see, obviously, in disasters.
That's so true. And that's such a gift that you bring, having I don't mean to make this sound cliche, but boots on the ground, as well as the public relations, and merging those two. That's a really valuable and important resource to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's it's wonderful to have that background, and I've been lucky to have lots of different people that I've worked with over the years. You certainly get that as you work different emergencies. Every person has an influence on you that you work with or you meet, and as I'm talking, every blink I can think of a different person, and it's really cool. So I really see myself every time I go out there, and I'm working as a combination of all of the people that have contributed to me into that moment. So big thanks to all of those people.
Okay, so let's talk about helping those people, and particularly some of your experiences about last summer. You experienced some of the most unique challenges in fighting this information, this communications crisis piece. You had to deal with things that we haven't seen the likes of in terms of the public response to emergency response. You had to deal with people not evacuating. You had to deal with people sabotage of equipment, people stealing things, theft, and also some very public protests. So while you're in the middle of, you had to deal with these mini crises, if you will, in the context of the bigger one, which is about the day-to-day crisis communications response. How did you do that? I understand that you developed a strategy. Tell us about how you did that and what the result was.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is I didn't sleep. You don't sleep much, especially in those first few weeks, and you work an incredible amount. And even when I'm kind of in the down cycle out of the EOC, I'm still looking around. And that's a big thing I really want people to know is it's so important to build it from research, to build from research, even in an emergency. You really need to understand what's going on, what the impact on people is out there in the community, and how you can connect that to the responders and the response that's happening. So my team worked really hard to collect intelligence out in the community. So we had people out behind the fire lines when the evacuations were still in place. So they were meeting with the residents that had stayed behind and hadn't evacuated, and met with the responders. And we also were looking at all the media and social media and just really trying to get a good sense of where things were at and where the needs for people were for information, and started to fill some of those gaps in. So how we kind of then develop that into strategy is really difficult in an emergency, as you can probably imagine. Like, it is very chaotic most days in an emergency operations center. I know, Jan, you've spent some time in that world, and it's you just don't have time. When you're doing strategy, you really like time to sit down and think, and to ponder, and to brainstorm, and to bring up ideas and shoot other ideas down and throw more ideas in, and so on, until you kind of come up with something. And that's really difficult when you're exhausted and working at a feverish pace. So what we do is we had this big long hallway at the just outside the emergency operations center in the Shuswab, as well as another room, and we would go between the two depending on what was going on. And we would put big sheets of paper up and start to sketch out as like, here's what, situation, break it all down. And then we would, as we were, we'd had markers in our back pocket, and then we would walk by and it was like, come up with this idea. And because it was on the way to the bathroom, on the way to the lunchroom, that sort of thing. So that's how it would often happen, these little bits and pieces. And then at the end of one of the days when we had a bit more time, we would get together. And once an emergency is ongoing for a bit, the EOC will shut down, around supper time. And so lots of people go home. And so it's quiet there. So that we would take that time and stay behind and develop that strategy and hammer it out. There were a few times where we could get together for a little bit in the meeting room and do that work. But it was very much a team effort that we would pull everything together, look at what we could do, and then from there, develop that strategy. So the other thing that we had two teams going at the same time in two different regions. So we tried to share our strategy across the teams because the timing of everything was almost similar. The fire swept through both regions at the same time. So the timing of that was lined up, and the issues were similar, and so on. And I want to give a shout out to Shauna Bruce. She provided us with insight from responses across Canada and strategies that she knew based upon her expertise and observation. So she gave us a strategy document a couple different times over to help us understand what might be workable and might not be right now.
Here are some quick stats Butterfly Effect Communications activities during 2023's season of emergency preparedness and response. 10,000 kilometers traveled, the equivalent of 24 weeks worked in emergency operations centers. 12,000 residents evacuated. 49 public engagement events where we had over 1,000 conversations with residents. 9,000 KN95 masks given to residents, nearly a mask for every person in that region. 2,600 videos and photos. 1,300 spokesperson mentions in 1 month. Reverse media coverage from significantly negative to positive in just 2 weeks. Over 1 million words written or reviewed. 0 lives lost. Now, back to the podcast.
And I know this is a bit of topic, but we talked a little bit about connections before delivering content and how important that was to your strategy in terms of meeting people and getting out there and having conversations with people one-on-one. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. So it started with Lloyd on our team getting in behind the scenes and having those conversations. And then from there, we started to make connections with some of those community members that were evacuated on the other side, right? So he was talking to some that were still within the evacuation zone, and then they had family members or friends that were outside. So we started to meet with them often after hours, down in, like, there was at the hotels or wherever in the parking lot, like you name it, we were everywhere. So that was the first kind of interaction with people that were affected one-on-one. And then we expanded that into doing community outreach and engagement. So we started in the Shuswap, we went to the Sorrento farm market and started to have conversations with the community members there and understand where they were at, what they needed, what questions they had. And the community is wonderful that way. Like you'll get the questions, right? Like they do the work for you. So you just need to piece everything together and put out the information then. So it was a great approach. And then we of course expanded that into once the evacuation was over, we went into the community at different points throughout the community. I met with them at general stores and grocery stores and wherever people were gathering, and had those conversations.
I think that really speaks to some of the success of your strategy is connecting with people on the ground. And let's talk a little bit about that as well too, is being able to connect with them. Because I know, at the start of last summer, we were dealt a little blow in our communications on all fronts for local governments.
Mm-hmm.
At the start of last summer, when Meta blocked Canadian news on Facebook, there are other platforms as well. And I know you have used Facebook, you and Emily have sort of pioneered it back in the Caribou fires years ago as being such a great way to connect with communities. So with us not being able to get the news onto Facebook, how did that impact how you delivered information or how you developed your strategies and tactics around delivering that information?
Yeah, talk about bad timing. It was the Meta ban was really just kind of going in place in July. So as the fires were starting, and then they got worse at the end of July. So nobody really knew fully what the impact was going to be like. And it was significant. You mentioned Emily Up and I back in the Caribou in 2017, and credit to that organization, the Caribou Regional District, that did have an established Facebook page for the emergency program, and they still have that to this day. So what we did was we just kind of really tried to grow that, make it even larger, and it was amazing. We had 1 million video views back then.
Yeah.
For a population of 66,000 people. And we did that in like just a hair over a month. I think it was 32 days or something like that. Like it was a very, very powerful platform. And now it's shifted, and Meta's platforms, all of them, have become a place where false information has completely taken over the, real news and real information. So it's a stunning reversal, and it's really difficult. in the midst of it, I was furious at them for doing this, because it really did impact people, because you couldn't even share information. Nobody had any clue how to do it. And still, I really still don't see people being able to easily share Canadian news, because if you try to put a link in, it blocks it. They're even blocking images and things like that. So it's making it very difficult. So yeah, the metrics for local government pages now have really shrunk down to being tiny. No matter what we seemed to try last year, the interest has been lost on Facebook for Canadians, and the algorithm promotes like Facebook groups, even Facebook groups from outside the country, like just very random groups about different topics, more than sources within the country. So it's a very difficult spot, and it's made it, frankly, it's quite dangerous, what's happened with it, and right in the, Canada's worst wildfire season. So I've unfortunately lost a lot of faith in their platforms, being able to support emergencies going forward, which is, it just breaks my heart, because they were so spectacular before. And I was a huge promoter of it, as like I stood on stages wherever and talked about how awesome Facebook was.
Yeah.
And so now I'm saying owned media, owning your own thing is the future, because just with a flick of a switch, these large media companies can cut out really important things.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Owning it as well. Obviously, these disasters are very difficult for everyone involved. In your role, you've often noted, and this is something I'm sure you saw a lot of in your work in the She Swap and that face-to-face work that you were talking about, but just some of the challenges of mental health well-being for responders. Tell us about what you've experienced and what other responders should watch for.
Yeah. What I've seen over the last several years is the disasters are not what they used to be. When I think back to 20-ish years ago, the length and the impact of the disasters has gotten quite bad compared to what it used to be. And particularly that length is where it's really impacting people, because going back to the Caribou fires in 2017, we that ran 77 days of emergency, which at the time was unheard of, right? Like I couldn't find anything even close to that in Canadian history.
Yeah.
And now the 3 emergency operations centers that we worked in last summer ran almost 100 days each. So 3 of them did that. So that really wears people down as responders, no matter what position in. So I got to talk to a lot of firefighters this time, and I made sure that I talked to a lot of firefighters, because the way the Shuswap fire in particular burned, it moved 21 kilometers in less than 24 hours. And what I started to hear immediately once it happened was just how downright scary it was for everybody that was on the ground. And so that trauma is there with your responders, the people that are helping, right? And then if it applies then to those evacuated residents that ultimately did not evacuate and stayed behind to try to fight. So they're traumatized as well. Mm-hmm. And then those that evacuated are traumatized. It's scary, right? It's and so, add into that there's a lot of people that are frustrated. They don't feel heard. They don't understand what's going on. And, we're seeing a full spectrum of how people react to emergencies now that, we used to see the fight flight, but now we're seeing them, do more things. So the fear is kicking in, or the freeze is kicking in. Right. So, and seeing, that's the one that's kind of jumping up for me. So you really have to watch for that in everybody, and watching for it in my, my crew, who deal with public directly, quite often, and watching for their mental health. So always checking in on each other. I'm always, like, when I'm out talking fire, every single fire truck that I passed that was stopped somewhere, I stopped to talk to them to make sure I was checking in on how they were. And I realized right away, is like, we need to get critical incident stress in here, So I advocated for that team to come in and support that debriefing and that trauma to help them get through that, because it was a very scary event. And so same thing with the community. We have mental health resources we hand out. And I'm watching for that. I had a particular resident that, it was a really tough conversation because she didn't like me. She didn't like talking to me. She didn't like my answers. But she sat and talked to me for a while, and then she got up and she had to walk away because she just could not continue talking to me. But I made sure I circled back with a friend of hers to make sure that that they got her mental health support, because I could see that she was struggling. And so that's top of mind for me with these. And I really want to urge people out there that mental health is probably the number one priority right now when you're dealing in disasters, because it is just such an enormous impact on people.
Mm-hmm. That is so important. And I think it's something that is an area that hasn't been dealt with as much. And I think that's really important that you're calling attention to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think we can do a lot. There's, so this past year I took mental health first aid just to help me understand what I'm looking at, because I didn't know sometimes what I was looking at, even though I've seen it many times over. But I was like, is this person in trouble or not? Right? Like, are they, or am I, I didn't know. So there is a mental health first aid course out there. You can take it in your community most of the time. It's a really good course. It's one day. So, really urge you to take it. It was I really appreciated taking that course.
That sounds great. When you first told me about that, I'm like, I need to take that, because of course I'm, have been through our own situation here and try to help out where I can as well. So mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That's a really good tip.
When doom and gloom strikes, you want butterfly effect communications in your favorite contacts. We bring calm to chaos through effective communications. We believe ethical communications can guide populations and organizations to prepare, respond to, and recover from crises, emergencies, and disasters. But hey, we're not all doom and gloom. We do fun things too. We can help with projects like stopping glass from going in a blue card, or grease going down a drain, writing a report, or understanding how a community feels about something new. Maybe those aren't all that fun, but they are to us. When you are looking to engage, educate, or expand, put Butterfly Effect Communications in your favorites. Find us at www.butterflyeffectcommunications.ca.
I'm thinking about what you're talking about here too, though. We've got like a really tense situation. People have got through a lot of trauma. The residents there, in terms of, maybe losing their home, not knowing where their family and friends are, the process of loss and recovery. I'm just curious about when you bring that really sensitive audience together with your team, this is a really high stakes, high stress conversation that's happening. And what are some of the things that you can do to keep both your team, your responders, and the residents safe in these face-to-face interactions or open houses or town hall meetings?
Yeah. Safety is huge for me. I do have that background too. And so I want everyone safe, the residents, the responders, and my team. And that kind of caught some residents in particular off guard this year. That was often one of my first questions to them is like, are you okay? Are you safe? And they were really taken back, and they're like, why would you care? Some of them, because they were really, there was, as I said, lots of tension in this community. And I was like, don't worry about all that stuff. Let's just talk about you for a moment. Right. And so yeah, at the same time, we did have to deal with this extreme tension. There was threats. We saw lots of things happen that were, very abnormal compared to any emergency that I've dealt with. And so before we did outreach, we developed a really strong understanding of our environment that we were going into. We did meet with, as I said, those residents that didn't evacuate. We met with some of the most vocal opponents to response efforts. And we also went out and scouted all the locations where we wanted to possibly do public engagement. So we had a good sense of what we were walking into. And, in the past, I've gone solo to public meetings or out to speak to people. Like, that was very normal for me and felt safe. I never had a situation like that. So even if it was my first time in that location. I remember going to different spots in the past, and I was like, I've never been to this spot before. I don't know any of these people. And I'm walking in, and it was fine. I never ever felt threatened. That's not something I'd recommend now, based upon what we experienced last year. The threats that were made towards us, I had them right in front of my face. Like, the person walked right up and do that on a few occasions. And that happened to other people on my team. So we made sure we put a lot of emphasis on resident safety, but also our own safety. And we wanted to know that we were there to help people, and we didn't want them to, see us as something that they should fear and they should attack. So yeah, we had a sort of a structured team approach, and we took out, a lot of the first engagement processes we went out and did were, a team of 6 to 8 people. And yeah, we just wanted to hear the experiences. We gave out safety information to people, and thousands of dust masks, for example. So some of the leftover stuff from the pandemic, we were able to put use to. And yeah, it's, I heard that particularly in the Shuswap, they finished a post-disaster public engagement here recently, and the tension is calmer there, which is great to hear. So, doing that work is important, and it does pay off, but it is hard, and you do have to put a number of safety pieces in place. And so we always knew where everybody was and what they were doing, and we always had multiple people on our team.
I think the comments that you're sharing are really helpful for our public information officers moving forward, because I do agree with you that the world has moved on, and that these are really high stress, high risk for serious conflict conversations, as you've experienced this past summer. So thank you for sharing those tips. Really valid. Okay, another question, because I just saw the news recently and it's not good. I'm sorry to say, but the federal government just announced on CBC the other day about the warning of another devastating wildfire season. And so I'm curious, just in closing, if you have some words of encouragement for our public information officers who might be faced with the prospect of yet another summer in the EOC.
Yeah. And so this is part of the challenge, is that we are doing this back to back. And last season, as we know, was a very difficult season all across Canada. So lean on your colleagues outside of the emergency is one thing. So my network with the Canadian Public Relations Society, including you, Jan, has been an incredible support for both advice and encouragement, and just, making sure, checking in. Get a little emotional thinking about it, but it was just like amazing when I was out there working, and to get those messages, to get a text of someone I hadn't heard from in a while. It means a lot, right? In the midst of it, it's tough, right? And you just kind of going through the paces every day. And when somebody remembers you like that and looks out, checks in, and sometimes it's, you get to have I have some friends that will send just something silly to distract me from the moment, and it's good. So really try to lean on your network that you have. And you have to push yourself. There's no question about that, but you also have to know your limits and respect the limits of your mind and your body. Work together as a team to support each other. That's one thing that my team was so incredible with last year. We had no tension within our team. We were just, anytime one person was having a rougher day, the rest of the group picked them up, right? And we're take work off of them if it was just not their day that day, which happens, right? So eat well, get outside for exercise, even if it's for 5 minutes. Like, get out and get some air get out of that EOC if you're in it, and absolutely relish any positives. So we would grasp onto these small positives. So there was like funny little sayings that would be said in the EOC. So we had a little board behind us that we wrote them down so we could look and laugh, right? Like lots of little funny things that were wins. We would, celebrate those as a group. And it's the other thing I'll say is working large emergencies is the most important work you will do in your career. You have to put absolutely everything into it that you know, and it's the most rewarding and the most challenging. So you get to an opportunity to really push yourself while having some really amazing moments mixed in there. So, and make sure you open your heart because that means a lot to people when you're working with them. It's I've shared tears, right? It's tough that those memories come back now, and it's like those, I love taking those forward with me, those people. And I the cool part is I get to go back into these communities and see these people, and it's so wonderful. And that's what happens when you open your heart and just be with them in that moment. So don't be afraid to do that, because it does actually help your mental health quite a bit.
Well, thanks so much for this opportunity to have this conversation. I have learned so much. You have touched my heart in so many ways, as you know. So I've learned as well from the other podcasts. So I do encourage you to check out the others in the series. I think this is so exciting. I think this is a space that we need more resources for people who are in these situations, and to have your voice of experience added to that is powerful. So thank you for doing that. But before I let you go, because you did give me the microphone, I understand that you've been doing these like pictures, getting these pictures by your friend Rowan made as a way to say thank you to your team members.
Yes.
So I understand that there's one of you.
Yes, there is. Yeah. And here it is. What do you think?
Here it is. I think it's great. I think she captured you perfectly. And I love the hair.
They're great. Yeah, she's awesome. And yeah, she captured a lot more personality in mine because she does know me. So yeah, wonderful. And yeah, we've had a lot of fun with those. So
that's great.
Well, Jan, I really appreciate you joining me and being the guest host for me. And, and on behalf of so many public relations professionals, you lift up so many people. I hear that all the time. You've been one of my cheerleaders. You're just such a great cheerleader to so many. And I just can't thank you enough. You're just so freaking awesome. Like, it's just that simple.
Thank you.
I always enjoy every moment that we get together. And so thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. And here's to our powerful network of colleagues that keep us uplifted.
I'm so honored to have had Jan join me for this episode as a guest host, and really appreciate her taking the time to do this. She's definitely one of the favorites in our profession. You can reach Jan Enns on LinkedIn or through her contact info in the show notes. She's with Jan Enns Communications as well, so you can Google that. And you will find me on LinkedIn and in the show notes as well. Thank you for joining us for the Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast. We are so appreciative of all of those who we work alongside, who take time from their lives and communities to help others. And we are loaded with pride for how responders react and residents respond. You can catch longer versions of this podcast on the YouTube channel for Butterfly Effect Communications, which includes photos, videos, and sample graphics from last summer. Thanks to the team at Stories and Strategies podcast, my friend Mike Brown with the Dark Poutine podcast, and Kendra Stoner for voicing the guest bios. For more podcasts, learning opportunities and resources, visit www.butterflyeffectcommunications.ca. That's also how you can connect if you'd like to hire us for disaster, emergencies, crises, issues, or, hey, even the fun side of public relations. We like that too. Thanks for joining us. Oh, hey, I forgot something. Do one thing this week to get prepared for an emergency at home. Try this one. Clear debris from gutters, ditches, and pipes so water can flow freely. This also cleans up materials that wildfires want to burn. The Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast is a 2024 production of Butterfly Effect Communications Incorporated. Make sure you share it with someone and go back and listen to another episode, okay? Thanks.